Welcome back to Communicology. Today I'd like to talk about something that we tend to, frankly, take for granted, and that's just the way that we talk, specifically how we use social media and any other electronic device that we use. You know, it's been long said that don't put anything on a text or online that you wouldn't want to see plastered in the newspapers. Well, where does that saying come from? Well, the idea is that what you write and what you put out there is viewable and available. And everything that you put out there can be grabbed and shown off to the world. That's kind of a scary thought to think about. But how often do we ever really think that? You know, it's one of those things that's kind of a damaging thing that can cripple you if you really start focusing on it and you start thinking about all the things you've ever posted. It's one of the reasons why a lot of times people, whenever they start moving up in responsibility at work or whatever, sometimes you'll see them go back and delete their entire X account or their Facebook account. And you're wondering, why did they do that? It's because they've realized that there is a gold mine of treasure there for that people could dig through and find stuff against you. And quite frankly, we've seen it played out. Think how many times that you have minding your own business and then some athlete says something dumb, or some movie star says something dumb or whatever on some kind of social media platform, and then maybe they apologize for it, maybe they don't, but the damage is already done and the tsunami is about to start. So, you know, you think about the damage of a tsunami. At first, there's an earthquake out in the ocean, and people think, well, oh, that earthquakes are bad. But it shifts the plates enough that it creates a wave that starts picking up momentum, and next thing you have this massive tidal wave that's going to hit, and it decimates everything in its path. Well, think of the problem that comes whenever someone finds a little nugget in your social media. It's that first earthquake, and even if it's something you said right now, or they dug up something from before, whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as they find a nugget of something that you've posted, and you've instantly started that earthquake issue. And you're like, okay, survive the earthquake, brace for impact, and it shakes a bit, and then it's over. I mean, that's how earthquakes work. They don't just keep going and going and going. They just shake a bit, and then you're done. Whew, that's over with. Until people say, if there's one thing, I bet there's more. And they start digging, and they start digging, and they start digging, and it doesn't take long to scroll and find more things. More things, more things, because, well, we're human and we say all kinds of things. And next thing you know, it's in the wrong hands and the wrong people are trumpeting it. And sometimes when it gets even worse, when people are really nefarious, they take things out of context. You know, X is very bad for that, because if you reply to somebody's, someone makes a post on X and you reply to it, you'll have just your blurb there, and it's like divorced from context unless you go looking for it. So you might say something and there it is, and no one knows how it's anchored or whatever, and they just grab it and screenshot it, and then it looks terrible on your account, but you're responding to something very specific. That kind of thing happens. So it's one of those things that we have to kind of look out for, because that tsunami will come and it will be bad. And you can try to lock down your accounts and things like that, but the thing is a lot of people, when they want to find out stuff, they'll dig and they'll dig and they'll save things before they announce what else they found. Now, if you're not popular, if you're not famous, you think, okay, I'm safe. And the truth of it is for the most part, you are. It's the popular people, because we love, as humans, love putting people up on a pedestal. We love to say, you are important. You are famous now. You are this great thing, and you're this role model. We're going to put you up on this pedestal, and it's so important that we put you here so we can bow down to you. But we also have this great sport of knocking people off pedestals. Either to put someone else on the pedestal, or just because we don't want to see you on the pedestal anymore, or just because it's fun to knock people off pedestals. So we'll do that. We'll put people on a pedestal, and then we'll also knock them down. So the fun times come when people figure out, ooh, I get to be the one that knocks this person off the pedestal. So they dig and dig and dig and find out what they can. A lot of times we see the pedestal issue, like when someone does something really bad in public, or they get caught like with a DUI or something, and then it just like snowballs and cascades in that moment. And who released that video? And they're the ones who get the accolades for knocking down this person off their pedestal. But the reality is people like to do this, and sometimes people look at it as great sport to humiliate other people, and they'll dig and dig and dig. And of course, the worst of them will take that stuff out of context, like I mentioned before. So the problem is, well, how do I survive this? Well, the thing is you should always be aware that this is a thing. Anytime I've done job hunting, I'm always aware that one of the first things that businesses do when typically, not everyone, of course, but typically what the first things they do is Google you. And with ChatGPT, it makes it even easier because you just hop on ChatGPT or any other AI platform and say, find me everything about this person. And it will spit out everything about that person. And it can scrub social media. It can scrub any kind of reference to you. Anytime you showed up in the newspaper anywhere, and it'll find anything and everything about you. Google used to be the standard for this because it could typically go and find things. It would give you a list of links and you just click and read each one. Whereas AI will scrub everything for you and give you a nice little summary. And then it'll provide the links if you want to go dig up more. So what it's able to do now is find all kinds of things and dig into all kinds of things about a person. So whether you like it or not, anytime you've picked up your phone and entered anything into it as far as like social media goes, you've left a digital footprint. And it's almost impossible to get away from having a digital footprint. Even people who aren't on social media still have some kind of a digital footprint somewhere because you've paid a bill, you've ordered something online, you've set up utilities at an apartment, you're out there, you're available. So the only way to go truly off grid is to have absolutely no connection to the world, not even having a car, because if you get a car, you register it with the state, and there's a digital footprint. So to go live as a mountain man in a shack in Montana is pretty much your only option, totally off grid. Not even having a post office box, nothing. Just eating the animals that you kill off the wilderness to survive. That's it, paying cash for everything, it's nearly impossible to really live that way. So as soon as you do anything that has any kind of record of transaction, you're in trouble. Even if you go to Walmart to buy something, there are cameras galore. They're recording you. You're being captured. And with that kind of surveillance technology that we have now, as far as with facial recognition and things like that, you can't just go anywhere and expect to not ever be captured. So how do I then approach this? Well, first of all, you recognize that you're always being watched, not like in a creepy Big Brother kind of way, but you're always being captured, in some way. So you have been turned into data bits, and you're floating all over the internet as data bits that exists. Now, the big thing from there is, what kind of data bits do you want to be? Because the way that you handle things and approach things and move through your life creates those data bits, those data points where people can point and say, aha. So I go to Walmart, I buy my milk, my coffee, my creamer, my eggs, my bacon, whatever. I buy that stuff, and that's recorded somewhere. It's digitally recorded. And it's so you can see what I'm buying. So even if you're like buying things that maybe you'd be ashamed of people seeing you buy, and you go through the self-checkout thinking you're okay, you're still not okay because it's being recorded somewhere. So your life that you live is totally surveilled in that way. So then when you take that next step to the obvious things like hopping on social media, this is also a self-tell, because as soon as I put my fingers to keyboard or thumbs to screen, I'm going to start telling you everything about me, the way I think, the way I act. And that's, some people are like really cool with that. That's the whole idea of being a, quote, social media platform. Ooh, I want to be social. Ooh, I want to be known. Ooh, I want to be famous. But most people don't realize what comes with that notoriety. It's everything that you do is now out there for the world to scrutinize. And you'll see sometimes like that athlete that has that dumb moment, the movie star has that dumb moment and says something stupid on X, and they say, hey, that's just for my fans or that's just for my friends. It's like you have 6 million followers. You don't have just friends on your X account or your Insta account. You're putting that up for the world to see. In fact, your account's not even locked down, so technically it's available to technically 8 billion people. So it's not private. And you have to realize that no matter how private you have your account, nothing truly is private, because even ChatGPT will scrub private accounts. So that's one of those things you need to be aware of, that, oh goodness, I should really watch what I'm saying and what I'm doing. Right, that's the point. So whenever, you put your fingers to keyboard or thumbs to screen, that's where we go back to that saying from the very beginning. Don't put anything on social media that you wouldn't want plastered out there on all the world's newspapers and in the nightly news and all that kind of fun stuff for the world to see. Well, what does that leave me? Well, it leaves you in a world where you're actually kind of mindful of your words, which frankly isn't a bad thing. I mean, think about the way that we talk about and treat each other on social media. I mean, it's a very dark, ugly place. If you scroll, you're going to see some dark and ugly things. Not just like crime stuff out there, but like the way that regular people treat each other, the things that they say about each other. One of the big things that Christians often wrestle with and sometimes forget exists is the ninth commandment. So when I'm thinking of the ninth commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness. And people think, oh, that's about like courtrooms, right? Like I don't want to testify under oath against somebody and lie. I mean, that's an extreme case of it, sure. But anytime I'm speaking poorly of another person, especially if I have no evidence, that's bearing false witness. It's one thing to say, I know about this person because I have seen it, I've interacted, that's bearing witness. But bearing false witness is really problematic. So when you move into the bearing false witness part, well, you can start seeing right away how that can be damaging. So anytime you just say something like about, for example, oh, all politicians are crooks. All of them, really. Every single politician and every single thing that they've done, that they're crooks. Well, I mean, I just, you're doing what's known as a logical fallacy of a hasty generalization, but you're also bearing false witness. How would you like it if people categorized you and swept you in with all of whatever and made a sweeping statement about you? Well, you'd hate that. So again, but you almost hear that tinge of the love your neighbor as you love yourself. How would you treat your neighbor? Well, how would you like to be treated? What would you like be said against you? So maybe you shouldn't say those things against your neighbor, even if they are true. When you get into the sixth commandment and you're talking about the idea of killing your, thou shalt not murder, and like, well, I haven't killed anybody. But, Jesus makes it clear that speaking poorly of another brother or sister is murder, because you're killing their character. You're killing, who they are, their reputation, their integrity. Wow, that really changes everything about what I say and how I talk online. Right. Because would you like those things said about you? No. Well, then don't say it about someone else. So you got to be very, very careful what the things you're putting out there. And because, again, I don't want to speak badly of another person. It's very hard because we're human. We really want to let a zinger fly sometime. And boy, we have opinions, and man, I'd love to say it and what I think about this person or that person, but nope, reel it in. Because again, that's a standard that I'm putting out there and that could damage that other person. And that's not a good place to be. But going back to the beginning of this whole conversation, I have to think about how it could also damage me. For example, I hop online and on my private account, I badmouth an employer, my employer. I badmouth them. Maybe they find out about it because I'm friends with colleagues at work. And then all of a sudden they go, hey, Richard says some awful stuff about, us. Well, that's all of a sudden a very bad place to be. Maybe I'm job hunting and they find out about that kind of stuff and say, you badmouth your last employer like crazy. You're probably going to badmouth us too. No, thank you. We're not going to hire you because you look like a person who badmouths people all the time. do you really? I mean, is that your normal life? I mean, maybe you are like that in real life. I don't know, but maybe like you let things fly on Facebook that you wouldn't in real life. Well, you've kind of exposed who you really are inside, and you've put that out there, and now people can look at that and then judge you. You are that person who speaks very poorly about other people online. You are that person who makes baseless claims online. You are that person who does those awful things online. Well, what if those things get released? Like I said, whenever you go job hunting, they're going to search and try to find anything they can about you to see, would you be a good fit at our company? And then they stumble across those things and they say, oh no, absolutely not. Or maybe you're in the dating scene and you look up somebody that you hear somebody who you think's really cool, really attractive, like maybe I'd like to get to know this person, and you look up that person and you find out who they really are by how they expose themselves online. Like, oh no, that's just me. That's what I do online. No, that's your inside coming out without a filter, and that's who you are. Ooh, and I don't like it. You're pretty on the outside, but boy, are you ugly on the inside. No, thank you. And so you can see how that kind of stuff really can ooze out. And again, we tend to think like, well, I haven't done this great, big, awful thing. It's the culmination of all these other small things that speak more to you. And they reveal what you really think, how you really feel about things. And that's an ugly place to be. And you don't want to be there because, well, quite frankly, it's not a good place to be. So whenever I say, watch what you post on social media, I don't mean it like, hey, just keep back just to keep your unhappy thoughts inside just so you can keep yourself employable. I'm also calling you to a deeper thought of, should you be having those thoughts? And that's a radical life change because quite frankly, again, would you like people thinking those things again about you? Would you like people having awful thoughts and saying bad things about you? Would you like that? Well, no, so reeling that back in yourself then is a good way to change. So, you should be starting to try to figure out, well, if I don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. So that's a good starting point right there. But from there, is there something that maybe I don't understand? So you start to think about learning. Like maybe I don't understand the situation like I should. So maybe keep my mouth shut until I can gather more evidence and then go from there. And then also, what's a little bit harder even yet is going to say, is there something good about this person I can say? That's a really hard thing to do because if we're really angry about something or someone or some situation, trying to find the good is very hard. That's not to say that we should never ever say anything bad. It's just one of those things that we need to be very, very, very careful with the things that we say that are bad. So if somebody commits a crime, like a violent crime, and we should express anger that crime happened. We should express anger, that and hope that justice is done. But at the same time, we need to also keep that framed properly because boy, we could go too far, and really go beyond. Because vengeance isn't ours. We can be angry with the situation, but we're not the ones that are called to exact vengeance. That's not for us. So be careful what's said, because again, people will look at you with the same kind of level. So if you're the kind of person who's always ready to wield the sword, you shouldn't be surprised when people come after you the same way. If you're the kind of person that offers grace, if you're the kind of person that keeps your mouth shut and doesn't condemn people falsely, people will likely and ideally treat you the same way. But whether they do or not is factually irrelevant, because what really matters is, are you taking care of your business? You can't change and control other people. You can hope that you can set a good example for them, but you can't control them. You can only control yourself. So whenever you go to hop online, whenever you get those fingers ready, stop for a second. Whenever you get your fingers ready to start tapping that reply, stop for a second, or 10 seconds, or 100 seconds, or 2 days, whatever it takes. Like I always tell my students, don't reply, like especially you get like a bad email or something, or a bad text. Don't reply when emotional. And it doesn't matter whether you're emotional happy or emotional sad. When you reply when you're emotional, you're going to be, more apt to say things that you don't necessarily mean or want to in that moment. So, relax, wait just a minute and see what's happening first, and then think about your response. Maybe type up your response in another document, look at it, think about it, come back to it, edit it before you send it out. If you need to say anything at all, which again, there is something good about keeping your mouth shut, because you don't want to be the one that people thinks you're a fool and then you open your mouth and then prove them right. You don't want to be that person. You want to be the one who's more reserved. And, so there are some practical things to this, but there are also some, more philosophical and even spiritual elements to this. It's important that you are a good, functioning adult, a good functioning human being, one that cares for the other. And you should do that, taking care of things in here first and not going crazy with your thumbs. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, that's okay. Thanks for tuning in anyway. But we'll see you next time on Communicology.